Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Motley, and I'm an executive vice president here at the Aspen Institute. My parents, which gives me all the more pleasure in inviting you to our campus and welcoming you to the last in the McCloskey's speaker series for this summer. Nothing that is done here on campus programmatically is done without the support of individuals. And so I want to recognize Tom and Bonnie McCloskey and thank you for this series. Bonnie is one of our trustees here at the Aspen Institute, so she's constantly watching to make sure that we're performing and living into our mission. But we can't live within our mission without other supporters. I see trustees who are here and many of our SOF supporters, and I'd like to thank you for the support that you've given us to create a wonderful summer worth of programming that has been both intellectually stimulating and provocative. We have an extraordinary panel here tonight, but before I introduce them to you, I want to recognize one or two governors who are in the audience. We have Governor Mary Phelan, who's here. What an arrival, Governor. Perfect timing. We're very happy to have you with us. We have Governor Gary Herbert from Utah, who's with us. And Governor Doug Ducey from the state of Arizona. And Governor Ducey is actually one of us. He is a Rodell Scholar Fellow of the Aspen Institute, which is a program designed to bring together nonpartisan leaders in politics from all across the country who work together to try to find the most viable solutions to some of the most complex problems in society. So we're very happy to have you here on campus. We're also very fortunate to have with us four great leaders, exceptional leaders, who will engage us in a conversation, a very timely conversation tonight, and they're seated right behind me. And allow me to introduce you. Governor Matt Bevin. Governor? The governor was elected the governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky in 2015. He attended Washington and Lee University on an ROTC scholarship. Upon graduating, he served as an active duty officer in the United States Army. After his military service, Governor Bevin worked for many years in the financial industry, then focused on founding several companies ranging from manufacturing to investment management to medical devices. We also have with us Governor Larry Hogan Jr. The governor was inaugurated as the 67th governor of the state of Maryland in 2015, and for more than 25 years, Governor Hogan worked in the private sector as a successful Maryland businessman. As governor, he has made record investments in both education, transportation, and enacted some of the most important environmental initiatives in our generation regarding the Chesapeake Bay. Thank you so much, Governor. The last governor is Governor Pete Ricketts, who was born and sworn in Nebraska as the 40th governor in 2015. Prior to his election as governor, he worked to support Nebraska entrepreneurs and startup companies. He is a past board chair of TD Emeritus Board of Directors, as well as the founder of Draken, which supports local entrepreneurs and startup companies. And finally, our dear friend, Ann Korologos, who's going to moderate the panel. Ann was the Secretary of Labor under President Ronald Reagan, but among many other things, she has served in numerous government positions. She's a member of the board of directors of many blue chip companies, including Michael Kors, AMR Corporation, Harman International, and Kellogg Company. She currently serves as the chairman of the board of Anderson Ranch, and in addition to running and serving on many boards, she's a successful art gallerist, director, and owner down in Basalt, the Ann Korologos Gallery. But most importantly, whether or not she'll note it, she was the first female and the only female chairman of the Aspen Institute and serves as chairman emeritus of our board. Thank you, Ann, and thank you, governors.
Thank you, Eric. And if we can move the podium, everyone will be able to meet Governor Bevins in a minute. while we're doing that, I'll just tell you that when Walter Isaacson emailed me and then called me about moderating this panel, I wrote him back quickly, and I said, I'm happy to do it, but do you think all this Republican stuff I'm doing is going to hurt my gallery in any way? And he emailed in a nanosecond and said, Ann, you have to understand, Democrats make art, Republicans buy it. It's a great system. So I'm here today and honored to be with these three governors. We had a chance to visit just before we came out. You're in for a great afternoon, I think. But I'd like to, another Walter admonition is get the news out of the way first. The theme of this is a state's eye view of America in 2016 and beyond. So we're going to deal with 2016 right off the bat. And so 2016 is upon us. Is Trump winning Governor Bevin's in Kentucky? And are you endorsing him and supporting him?
So how about Governor Ricketts from Nebraska? How about this guy? How about him? There were three questions wedged in there. I guess I could afford to miss one or two of them and focus on whether Trump is winning in Kentucky.
Just move it on to me real quickly, just like you tried to do.
The bottom line, this is, and let's be honest with ourselves, this has turned out to be a don't ask, don't tell type of year. It really has. I don't care which side you're on. It's that kind of a year politically. And so in some measure, your question, is he winning in Kentucky? He is, and he will win Kentucky handily. I have not endorsed him. I will vote for him. I see this as a very clear choice. This is a binary issue. And again, I did not endorse him on purpose. It wasn't, I have issues, as do others, with any number of things. Those don't need to be adjudicated at this point. I'll simply say this. This is a very clear choice. And for those among us who might want to tease ourselves into thinking that somehow there are alternatives to the two choices, we're going to have a Hillary Clinton or a Donald Trump as the president of the United States. It is binary. It's not a crossroads. It's a fork in the road. We're going to go one way or the other. And there will be direct, very specific ramifications associated with whatever choice we take. And it will either be a more regulated, bigger government, more intrusiveness into your lives type of a government, or it will have the potential to be less likely. And it's not just the Supreme Court, it's the EPA, and it's the IRS, and it's a fill in the blank. And that is the choice. And if we think otherwise, we are deluding ourselves. So.
Governor, thank you for that short answer. And I think they also told me collectively they know how not to answer questions. So Governor Ricketts, how about in Nebraska? It's a red state, I believe. How's Trump going to fare there?
Well, I have not seen any polling numbers per se, but as you point out, Nebraska tends to be pretty red. It's actually a pretty populous state as well, which also, frankly, plays to Donald Trump's message. So I expect that he will win there pretty handily. So that's going to happen pretty handily. I actually endorsed Donald Trump when he became the presumptive nominee because he had a rally the next day in Nebraska, and I'm on his ag advisory team. Nebraska is an agricultural state, and certainly one of the things that if we do have Donald Trump as president, I want to have an impact, for example, when he talks about trade, because trade is incredibly important to Nebraska. And in fact, I had a chance to talk to him shortly before he did his rally in Nebraska and said, hey, I want to talk to you about a couple issues, trade being one of them, because you've been very anti-trade. And let me tell you, it really benefits Nebraska quite a bit, and why the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership is going to be so beneficial. And one of the things that really struck me is that in private, he is very charming, and his public persona is really quite different, right? He comes off as being very bombastic. But when I was talking to him privately, he was asking questions, taking notes, listening, and in fact incorporated some of the things we talked about, specifically about trade, in his remarks at the rally and in an interview I saw him do right after we talked. So that's really, I think, what I expect to see if Donald Trump gets to be president, is that he will surround himself with good people and listen to them. And when you talked about the Supreme Court, for example, he's put out who he would expect to be those nominees. So you can go out and see. If you don't like those people, then you've got a good indication on whether or not you're going to think Donald Trump would be a good person to pick the Supreme Court. So I think that some of those things really are going to be playing in his favor. And of course, campaigns do matter, and after Labor Day, people will really start paying attention.
So you don't see any slippage yet, like some are saying they're starting to feel?
Well, I think it's a bit premature to start going into, if you're a Trump supporter, I think it's a little bit premature to start getting worried, as I think the race really starts going hot and heavy after Labor Day. But like I said, campaigns matter. Campaigns matter, and Donald Trump, just like every other candidate who's come before him, has got to figure out not only how to secure his base, but also pull in the middle part of that base. And I think that remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you. Governor Hogan, I think you have a different story to tell.
Well, thanks for starting with the softball questions. And thank you guys for filibustering and eating up all the time so I can give a shorter answer.
Yeah, it's time we move on to the next question.
I think it's time we move on. My state is a little bit different. I happen to represent the bluest state in the entire country. I'm the second Republican governor elected there in 50 years. The last time last time that our state voted for a Republican presidential candidate was Ronald Reagan in 1980.
Smart state.
And I would say that Donald Trump is not going to win Maryland. It's a pretty safe assumption. He's probably going to lose by 30 points in our state. And I did not endorse and haven't gotten involved. I've stayed really active in the bipartisan effort to turn my state around and not focused on national politics.
For you. Thank you. With that out of the way, let's talk about Republican governors. There's a whole group with the Republican Governors Association here. I welcome you all. And one of the things you know, and most people may forget, there are 31 governors, 18 Democrats and 1 independent, 31 Republican, 18 Democrats, 1 independent. 12 states have governor elections this year, 8 Democrats, 4 Republicans. It's well known and documented that it's very hard to unseat a sitting governor. I think 5 in the past few years have been unseated. And concurrently with this election, just the 4 Republicans. We can talk about the 5 that are safe in the Democrats' side, 4 that are safe or leaning in the Republican, 3 toss-up. So whatever happens, I salute Fred Malek and the Republican Governors Association. We've got a solid group of governors out there. And governors, as we said earlier, you do things. You're close to your customer. You're all businessmen. You're close to your customer. You're listening to the people. You empty garbage and you control schools and you send out the National Guard when you have to. But a little known fact is also that state legislatures, numbers are pretty interesting. 5,920 of the country's 7,383 state legislature seats are up for election in the presidential year. 68 state chambers are under GOP control, and Democrats have 30 chambers. Sort of interesting. When people ask, how's the Republican Party doing? It's doing very well. So the question I have is, what's the impact of the Trump candidacy, or a different way of putting it for the future, perhaps, on a Clinton presidency, on the 30-plus governors, and I'm talking to 3 here now, but on your states? How do you look ahead, or do you just keep yourself in control of your state, of your legislature if you can, and of the agenda you've set? Governor Bevins.
You know, governors have a responsibility. They're chief executives of their respective states. It is an executive role. It's not a legislative or deliberative role. We have to get things done. When there are riots, there is a response needed. When there are floods, there is a response needed. When there is homelessness, it needs to be addressed. When there is a budget shortfall, it needs to be resolved. These are not things you get to debate. They are things that of necessity must be taken care of. And so to that end, we don't have the luxury of being ideological to the nth degree. We can have our ideology, and I certainly do. I'm a conservative person. I'm the 4th Republican since the 1800s in Kentucky. We don't do this very often. But I will say this. I ran with an expectation. I was very clear in my message. I ran on a very fiscally conservative approach. There were 7 tenets. And they were all fiscal in nature. They were about addressing the pensions and taxes and right-to-work legislation and tort reform and school choice and things of this nature. None of the above of which we've had ever in Kentucky. I have the only house in the South that is still controlled by Democrats. So there was an expectation that I would be handcuffed, that I would not be able to get things done. And yet that's not acceptable. We have the worst funded pension system in America. That was something that needed to be addressed. It wasn't a partisan issue. It was something that needed to be addressed. And so that and a number of other things I had to move forward on with a sense of purpose. I've been governor now for about 8 months. And yet it isn't easy as that. Just doing the right thing is not always easy. Partisanship does matter. And it will matter who is elected at the highest level, depending on how things flow forward. But all I'll say is I've been sued by, at least a dozen times now. I've been sued by my own attorney general several times in the last 6 months. I've been sued by the Speaker of our House. I've been sued by several other state legislators. Anything they don't like, they sue me for because their friends are in the courts and they know they'll win the first level. And then they hope to then settle with you and never actually see law being definitively resolved. What I think we have the responsibility to do as governors is recognize that there is a sovereignty to states, that there is an autonomy to states, and that the 10th Amendment, which delineates the fact that those powers not given to the federal government, which are fewer and enumerated, are the responsibility of the states and of the people. And we had better, sure as blazes, regardless of who the next president is, take this seriously. Because it is our responsibility to recognize the fact that it was the states that created the federal government and not the other way around.
Thank you. Governor Ricketts, I can't ask you the first question without it being this one. The Cubs are 12 games ahead in the National League Central with 46 games to play. 108 years ago, they won the World Series. Is this the Cubs' year?
Well, anybody can have a bad century. But just so you know, Ann, that's not actually how we think about it. What we think about is, and politics and baseball are my two favorite subjects, so we can talk about either for a long time. We think about it as being consistently good. If we go to the playoffs 7 out of 10 years, we will go to the World Series. So we're not trying to put all the pressure on the team to go this year. It's about get to the postseason. Once you get to the postseason, anything can happen. Remember the Cardinals 5 years ago? Last game of the season, got in, wild card, won the whole thing. That's the postseason. So our strategy is consistently be good and get to the postseason. To get to be consistently good, however, we had to change the culture. This idea of lovable losers, that was the Cubs organization. They weren't doing anything meaningful to allow themselves to win, to be good. And so we had to come in to change a culture. Because that's what we had to do, is change a culture. We brought in new people, and we started demanding accountability and excellence. We started measuring what people were doing, setting goals, holding them accountable for reaching those goals, and that's how we were able to start changing the way the Cubs thought about how they did business, both on the baseball side and on the business side. Both sides of that house needed to be reformed, revamped. And frankly, it's the same sort of thing right now that I'm trying to do in Nebraska. Bring about a culture change there as well in state government. To bring about the things that we do in the private sector to demand accountability and excellence, put measurements in place. Crazy things like job descriptions for cabinet heads, annual review processes. These are things that didn't exist before. Measurements for the agencies. So by holding people accountable and demanding excellence and setting goals, we're going to change the culture in state government just like we did at the Cubs. Do you like how I turned it back around like that?
That's the way you're going. I'm going to ask the Governor Hogan if he's going to buy the Orioles in a minute. But just to finish, some of the things that maybe people don't know that I found interesting. The 4th article of the Nebraska Constitution calls you the supreme executive power of Nebraska.
I wish it were that easy.
Well, I know
Supreme
you've
executive power.
He gets a cape and everything. It's awesome.
Comes with a crown.
But unlike your two colleagues, you also have a unicameral legislature. And how are you doing with that? And you're probably closer to how Washington functions than you are to how your colleagues are functioning, even with all the lawsuits. Am I right?
Well, Larry told me I can't whine about the unicameral too much.
Okay.
So Nebraska has a unique system of legislature. We're the only state that has a unicameral. It's a nonpartisan body. And I will say that, actually talking to colleagues, I'm told that it's less polarized than other state houses around the country. But having said that, if you've all read Federalist 51, you know James Madison laid out that a one-house legislature puts the executive at a huge disadvantage. And so no matter what they write in the Constitution about being the supreme executive, those legislators don't think that, I can tell you that. And so it really is a challenge. I'm the only check and balance in the system. That in a two-house system, you've got a House and a Senate that are playing off against each other. There's a check and balance there. A bad bill maybe passes in the House. The Senate says, that's their problem, it's not my bad bill, and it dies. Well, that doesn't happen in a unicameral. There's a vote train goes on in every legislature, but there's a lot more bills that get passed and then hit my desk that I've got to be the check and balance on. So I think it does put more pressure on the executive. And it creates unique challenges, but like I said, it's also probably less polarized than maybe other state houses. So there's a trade-off, in any system, and that's just the one that we deal with in Nebraska.
I want to come back with all of you in a minute. I'll finish with Governor Hogan on this question. A little more specificity, as you touched on some of the things you're doing. It strikes me as businessmen that you've taken on the governing with in mind, as I said, close to the customer. But you're tax cutters, you're reform-oriented, you're cutting red tape, you're thinking about various programs to reform some of the systems that you found so inadequate. So we'll come back and allow you to even do more of your wonderful explaining of your programs. But Governor Hogan, you're our neighbor in Washington, D.C. To Maryland. You've got a large amount of federal workers in Maryland, and yet you've come in, as you pointed out, as the second Republican governor in nearly 50 years. And you came in after having founded Change Maryland, advocating lower taxes, less government, public engagement, bipartisanship. Talk a little bit about how you've been able to do that living so close to Washington, D.C., which seems to be the opposite of everything you're doing, and how can those of us who are in Washington benefit more by your infiltrating perhaps across that border?
Well, it's a great question. Thank you. So our state was way off track and heading in the wrong direction. Over the past 8 years, we had lost 8,600 businesses, 200,000 jobs. There was a poll that said nearly half of all Marylanders wanted to leave the state. And that was something that was frustrating, not just Republicans. Our state only has 26% Republican. There were Democrats and independents who were just as frustrated about the direction that our state was heading. And we focused on economic issues, and I created a nonpartisan organization. We didn't really have much of a Republican Party, and I didn't want to get 26% of the vote. So I formed an organization called Change Maryland, and we just talked about the issues that everyone agreed on. People wanted to put our economy back on track. They wanted to get our state heading in the right direction. They want more jobs. They felt overtaxed. We had, in Maryland, raised taxes 87 times in a row, increased taxes by $10 billion, and it had crushed our economy and caused all these businesses, jobs, and taxpayers to flee the state. So we focused on that, and I tried never to get into a partisan battle. I tried to stay focused on the issues, because I believe, as I'm talking to people all around the state of Maryland, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or you're an independent, you're really frustrated with the partisanship, is particularly in Washington, but all around the country. They don't like the name calling, the finger pointing. They want what they want, and what most people want are bipartisan, common sense solutions to the real problems. And they want people to get things done. They want people to say what they're going to do and then do what they say. And that's what we've tried to do. So I took office January of last year. We eliminated 90% of a $5.3 billion structural deficit. We put a $200 million income tax refund. We cut taxes by $700 million. We lowered tolls, first time in 50 years, by $270 million. We cut 255 fees all across state government, cut regulations. The result has been a dramatic turnaround in Maryland. We went from last place in the Mid-Atlantic region in job creation to first place in the Mid-Atlantic region in job creation. In the month of March, we went to #1 in the nation. Our small state of Maryland created 19,000 jobs in 1 month, more than any big state in the country. So we've gone from one of the worst to one of the best in the country. It was the best year for businesses in Maryland in over a decade, and people are now happy with the direction. So even though I'm a Republican in the bluest state in the country, more than 2/3 of Marylanders now believe we're heading in the right direction, and nearly 3/4 of them approve of the job that we've been doing.
It's a Are you getting competitive, all of you?
No, I was
now?
just saying, what a bragger. What's
What'd
up
you
with this
guys do?
guy? Hey, it ain't bragging if it's true, though, and it's the truth.
And it's true. Let me stay with Governor Hogan for a minute and then go back down the line and just ask a couple of follow-up questions on your state. Do you want to bring us up to date on Baltimore and what happened last April, and then with the DOJ last week?
Sure. So I had just been elected governor, the first time I've ever held office. I'd been in the job for 90 days, and I had an agenda. I was focused on turning our economy around. I had a lot of things that we had planned for. That was something that we had not planned for. 90 days in, we had the worst violence in 47 years in our city. Our largest and most important city was in flames. Quickly overwhelmed the city government. We had, in just the first few hours, 400 businesses were burned, looted, and destroyed. There were 170 police and firefighters who were injured. There was chaos in the city. And I immediately declared a state of emergency and sent in 1,000 state troopers and 4,000 members of the National Guard. We showed the force, but didn't use the force. We brought the people into the city to try to keep people safe, but we allowed people to protest for a week. We just stopped all the violence. I spent the entire week walking the city, walking every single neighborhood, trying to restore the calm and the peace. I worked with community leaders and faith-based leaders. The next morning, after the riots broke out and the city was on fire, I was there at sunrise at North and Penn. If you watched on CNN or Fox where the CVS was burned, I was there, hugging people who were cleaning out their homes and their stores, which had been looted. Then I went to Freddie Gray's neighborhood in Sandtown and talked to his neighbors and family and friends. And we spent the entire week. We restored peace and calm to the city of Baltimore, and our team did an incredible job, and we're now, we just had a seminar a month ago at National Governors Association where they asked me to talk about our response there, and we're actually, teaching people around the nation how to respond to a crisis, but they didn't really teach me that at New Governor School. It was instinctive, and we just acted. Baltimore's got serious problems, and as most large cities do, but we're really focused on trying to see what we can do. The DOJ report that just came out obviously pointed a lot of fingers at past administrations, particularly while Martin O'Malley was mayor of Baltimore, where most of the criticism went. But the police department's got a lot of work to do. In this last legislative session, we passed a Justice Reinvestment Act. It was a bipartisan, hardly negotiated with Democrats and Republicans to reform our justice system. We talk about lowering recidivism, talk about second chance for people that want to put their lives back on track, things that a lot of Republicans don't usually talk about. We're making progress, but you can't fix all the problems of urban America in a short period of time. It's taken more than 50 years to get to this part, but we're doing everything we can. We're investing record numbers in education, job training programs. I just put $100 million into the city of Baltimore for blight removal. We've got 19,000 empty row houses there that are, not only an eyesore, but a hotbed for crime and drugs. And
You also, I think, have money you put in for fighting heroin addiction, and I think all of you are dealing in some way with the drug and opiate phenomenon to me. But
well, as I was running for governor, the biggest surprise for me was, as I was traveling around, I went to all of our counties. Some were urban, suburban, very rural. Everywhere I went, I would say, what's the number one issue facing your county or your community? And I was shocked that the number one issue everywhere was heroin and opioids. We have a little place called Caroline County, which is our most rural county on the eastern shore of Maryland. I thought they were going to talk about agriculture issues or maybe some transportation needs, and they said their county was overrun with heroin. And I went to a southern Maryland small town where they said 90% of their crime and the people in jails were heroin related. So we decided to focus on it. I talked about it a lot during the campaign. Right after I was elected, I appointed our lieutenant governor to head up a heroin and opioid abuse task force. We brought all kinds of professionals together, held hearings all around the state. They came up with recommendations, 33 recommendations, to try to attack this problem from all directions, from the treatment side, from the medical side, and from the criminal side. So we've now got RICO statutes that we can take down gangs and criminal enterprises like you could under federal law, but we also put more money into treatment programs, and this is a problem that is affecting and tearing apart families and communities all across America. And I know a lot of other governors are focused on it as well.
Thank you. Governor Ricketts, you have 3% unemployment in Nebraska. You just signed, I think, a $400 and some million trade bill with Taiwan. Talk a little bit, you're quite different with your issues than Governor Hogan is, and I suspect Governor Bevin's. Talk a little bit more of what you're doing there. In Nebraska with 3% unemployment doesn't sound the same as necessary job creation as some other states that are hurting. But what's happening out there, and why is it so successful?
Well, what we are trying to do, and which I think all of us as governors, our goal is to help our states grow. How do we create more and better paying jobs? How do we keep our kids and grandkids in our states? How do we attract people to come to our states? And with 3% unemployment, we've got different challenges. So for example, one of the things we did is we changed our unemployment system into a reemployment system. And by that I mean is everybody who's applying for those benefits sits down with a jobs coach first and creates a resume. And not only has that resume to go out and look for a job, but that resume is now searchable online so that companies can proactively reach out and say, hey, you've got the skills I need, would you take a look at this job? So that's one of the ways we've been innovative, trying to connect job seekers with the employers who have those jobs. And it's also important that we're providing a higher level service. Because of the way the U.S. government collects the data, we don't have the data yet to show that the people are actually spending less time on those benefits, that they're getting jobs faster. We hope to be able to collect that data. But that's important because one of the things we know is the longer that you're unemployed, the more your job skills degrade. So we've got to try and get you back into the workforce as quickly as possible. But one of the things we do know that even though in the first 5 months of this year, we've taken our benefits up about $12 a week, or $12 a month, so we've increased the amount of benefits, and our unemployment rate has actually ticked up from 2.8% to 3%, we actually have reduced the amount of benefits we're paying out by $6.7 million, and it's so about 15%. At the same time, across the country on average, benefits paying out have gone up about 1.2%, or about $172 million. So while we don't have quite all the data we'd like to show that this is actually helping people get back to work faster and being innovative how we connect people, that's one of the things we're doing. And that's really one of our challenges in Nebraska. I said better paying jobs. Our average wage is actually below the national average, so we're trying to think about how we improve that statistic. And just in general, and this applies to everything, including our reemployment program, how do we do a better job of delivering services? I believe that's why the people of Nebraska hired me, to bring my private sector experience to making government more effective, more efficient, and more customer focused. And by doing that, we will actually help the job creators out there do a better job. I mean, Nebraska right now, Forbes last year ranked as the 3rd best state to do business. CNN ranked as number 7. So we are trying to work on developing a culture in state government that we are working to help create those jobs with businesses so that they can expand and help hire more Nebraskans and ultimately help companies expand in Nebraska, draw more people to Nebraska, because at the end of the day, we've got to hold on to our young people and draw more people to our state because of that 3% unemployment rate.
I'm struck with your comments earlier that we should watch who Trump surrounds himself with. I would nominate you for U.S. Department of Trade. I think Bill Brock is here, a former trade representative, with your trade deal with Taiwan. Mr. Trump.
Well, thanks. I got the best job in the world right now.
I don't think Mr. Trump is pro-trade right now, so good luck influencing him. Governor Bevins, not last or least, you pointed out how new you are in your job, and yet I know that you saved the Kentucky underfunded pension plan so far and paying down Kentucky debt. You're also reforming the criminal justice system. You're really off to a fast start. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Sure. I mean, I thank you. I mean, we are off to a fast start, and in some measure, I don't see this as a game. And I encourage you, as it relates to this electoral process, as it relates to things that are happening both federally as well as in your respective states, politics is not a game. It's not ours versus D's with an occasional I sprinkled in. This is real stuff. And while we happen to be Republicans, and I was elected as a Republican, the reality is I'm responsible for all the constituents in Kentucky. And there are far more Democrats than Republicans in our state. And so that what I have focused on with a sense of urgency and a sense of conviction, because truth be told, I've never been in elected office like others on this stage prior to being governor. I didn't aspire to this. I didn't study political science. This wasn't something I wanted to do. I became weary of paying taxes and seeing them get wasted, seeing them being redistributed and reallocated by people who frankly had no comprehension whatsoever as to how the wealth of this nation has been created and is continuing to be created. And yet I have a divided House and Senate. I have a speaker who's suing me, an attorney general who's suing me, other Democrats who are suing me. So obviously this is not a friendly environment. They think they're going to wear me out. They did this to the last Republican governor we had. They sued him literally right out of town. And I grew up poor in the country. That does, bullies don't work well with poor kids from the country. So I will say this, though, knowing, though, that if you chase 2 rabbits, you don't catch either one of them. The same with 100 rabbits. So to that end, you got to be smart. You got to pick your battles. What is it that you're going to work on? I did not, in this effort, knowing how difficult it would be to pass a budget, for example, and with everybody betting that we would not be able to, and you look at poor Governor Rauner in Illinois and how Madigan is playing him and how they're basically holding that hostage, they tried the same thing with me. And long story short, I had to take away the sticks and leave in the carrots. So while it would have been good to remove, for example, the inventory tax as a state that is the hub of manufacturing in America on many fronts, and yet we're one of 2 states with an inventory tax. Had that been in there, do you think that all the headlines would have been, helping the rich? Of course they would have. So you got to pick your battles. So some of the things that we have focused on with a sense of urgency have been shoring up the pension system. We put $1.2 billion into our failing pension systems. They're a long way from being shored up, but it was more money than has ever been put forward. You think that the teachers' unions who worked so hard against me were not secretly happy for this? And trust me, next time they're asked to wade in, it will be a don't ask, don't tell for them as well. They're grateful that somebody for the first time is stepping up and addressing something that was a concern to them. I focused on things like programs like fostering success, implemented, pioneered something for how we have all these hundreds and thousands of young people in our states who at the age of 18 are coming out of the foster system and being dumped out into society with no backbone or no bench of support, I should say. And these poor kids are lost. They've never had a family. They have no support network. They now have nothing. And they statistically are vulnerable. And these young women are going to get pregnant early. These young men are going to, and women alike, are going to invariably end up on the wrong track and end up in prison at high proportions. So what are we doing about that? This isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. And so we set up a program where we literally brought these students that were between the ages of 18 and 23, not students but young people who had aged out of the foster system, were now on their own. And we did 2 things. We created an employment program both with the state government and with private employers who brought them on board with a 10-week program where they were given jobs where they were paid $10 an hour and they were taught how to show up on time and how to dress, and we gave them financial literacy courses and we gave them opportunities. More than 60% of these kids have now gotten full-time employment as a result of this. There was a second part to this. We brought families. We reached out to families like us, and said, would you be willing to be a mentor to these kids? Would you be willing to take one of these young people with no legal or financial obligation, but a willingness to be a mentor and to help them? Would you be willing to come alongside these young people, invite them to your house on Thanksgiving, help them to figure out how to fill out a job application, help them decide between 2 choices that they have to make, whatever the case may be? We hoped for a couple of dozen. We worked with an organization, Orphan Care Alliance, and some others to create training programs for the couple dozen families we hoped would sign up. We've had hundreds. It's going to transform our state. I introduced something called the Red Tape Reduction Initiative. If you want to learn more about it, go to redtapereduction.com. I encourage every state, red, blue, and otherwise, to do the exact same thing. We have more than 4,500 pieces of regulation that affect business in our state. And I'm quite confident that we can thoroughly regulate business with, say, 3,000. And so to that end, I literally have committed to the fact. I've noticed most of the laughing's over on this side. I don't know if that's, but in all seriousness, I mean, I'm committed to, and I've said publicly, we are going to remove 1/3 of the red tape in Kentucky that affects business in the next 3 years, and we will do it. You watch Kentucky move. We will get that done. These are the types of things that I've been moving on. You know, this and expungement. We passed an expungement bill. We are leading on the fact that we have a tremendous divide in our nation. And again, we talk about it politically. I encourage you to ask yourselves, and I appreciate that there's young people here too. For those of you who have brought young people here, you have children, you have grandchildren, whether they're here or not. Why are you here? Why are you here? Why do you care about this? And how badly do you care? Because there is a divide, and it's more than anecdotal. There is a divide in America, ideologically, financially and otherwise. And we are becoming fragmented. And the fabric of America and the many threads that comprise that fabric are being shredded one at a time, and they're being pulled out, and that fabric is being twisted and torn. And we have individually and responsibly, collectively, a responsibility to fix this. We do. And so, frankly, we have this recidivism with our prisons. We have people who make bad choices, increasingly drug-related when they're young, and they get on a track where they're basically screwed for the rest of their life. And we, as a responsible government, have a responsibility to find a way to find solutions to that. And so we passed an expungement bill that gives people for nonviolent felonies, for people where there is no victim, where restitution has been paid, where service, where their prison terms have been served, to have the ability to have their rights restored to them, to have their ability to not have to check a box saying they're a felon, so that they can become integrated and become a part of society again. And these things matter. These are not R things or D things. It confuses all the D's in my state when I'm leading on these things, because these are things they've given lip service to. But lip service, we are at a point in America where we have got to stop blowing smoke and giving patronage to things, and we've got to start electing men and women who will actually lead with a sense of purpose and a sense of conviction and with a sense of urgency and put their feet on the gas. These are just a handful of the things that we've gotten done in 7 months. And I've done it with not the most greatest amount of support from the other side, but we've done it because we've used the power of social media and the bully pulpit that we have as governors to shame people into disagreeing with the logic of these things. And while we are a society that increasingly does not have much shame left, as is evidenced on many fronts, nonetheless, there is still the ability to use shame effectively, and I don't think that we as governors should fail to appreciate the power of that. So these are just some of the things that we're working on. In addition to that, we are working on, school choice. We're working on pension reform, tax reform, and other things. These things shall pass. I will say this. I'm not going to brag like these guys do, but I will say this. You watch Kentucky go. Just watch Kentucky. You think our horses run fast. You think our horses run fast. You watch our economy in the next 4 years.
Governor, I know everything you said is true. And as you said to Governor Hogan, it's all right to brag when it's all true. So thank you. Governor Ricketts.
Let me just say, I know he has the Kentucky Derby, but I'm the only one that crowned a Triple Crown winner.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and it's now at stud in Kentucky, I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, you can tell the Republican governors the competition is fierce in this market economy. Governor Ricketts, you were talking to me earlier, and this is on a different note, about your traveling with your daughters to look at colleges and the like. And that led to a discussion about what our young people know, other than the show Hamilton. Hamlet maybe is another one, but anyway, Hamilton, about our founding fathers, about America. You're in the heartland for sure. Do you want to comment a little bit on that? Because this may lead us into a final round here on what is our theme, which is the beyond. So beyond all this, what about America?
Yeah, we were talking about Hamilton, which I think is something that has been fantastic for our young people to find out more about our founders, because I don't think with what has happened in education, we have certainly gotten away from civics. I can recall when my daughter was in 4th grade, they had stopped teaching the state capitals in her school. I couldn't believe it, so I called up my State Board of Education representative and yelled at him, and he got it put back in the curriculum. But, you know, that's crazy. And so I think Hamilton actually has been great because I've got 2 teenage daughters. They love the musical. And when we went looking at colleges for my older daughter, we went to Boston and we went to Virginia, and they were fascinated about the history. My daughter wanted to go to Monticello and see where Thomas Jefferson lived. She wanted to go at the battle site of Yorktown to see the British fort that Alexander Hamilton had taken as a lieutenant colonel. So, things like that I think are really actually great because things like Hamilton can be one of those things that helps inspire. And I think it really also says a couple of things about how we have to rethink education. That education, we are basically teaching our kids the same way we did 100 years ago. And that's not a way to be successful. We've got to challenge our educators to rethink how they deliver that, leveraging technology that's impacting every other industry to be able to do a better job of how we deliver that. And thinking outside the box, like maybe musicals like Hamilton, about how we engage young people to start learning more about our history, how we make it interesting for them. They're very different from the way that I grew up, with regard to how we thought about things and learned about things. So, and frankly, if you look at it in a situation where it's true everywhere, you've got taxes that are already high. People are already feeling the burden of that. They're not interested in spending more in taxes. I think to Matt's point, people don't want no government. They want government works, and they're frustrated because government hasn't been working. So that's our job to try and make government work. But we need to think about how we're rethinking the same way we're rethinking how we deliver services. We need to rethink the way that we're delivering education so that we can be competitive going into this 21st century. Because I can tell you right now, we are putting a lot of money into education. We're not getting the returns back out of it. We've got to rethink how this works. And just like every other industry, we got to do a better job of providing those services and bring our costs down at the same time.
Thank you. All of you can comment, but I'll start with Governor Hogan. How do you all balance, and how will you balance, public policy needs with cutting taxes and cutting spending? You just said a lot of money is going to education. I'm sure much is wasted, but nonetheless, how are you going to balance that going forward? Governor?
Well, what we found was that by cutting taxes, we actually increased revenues. Because as I mentioned, we've been growing jobs at a much faster rate. Instead of losing 200,000 jobs, we created 74,000 since I've been governor. So we have 74,000 new people paying income taxes. We have businesses that are being successful that are now paying more taxes. So even though we cut some wasteful spending and shrunk a little bit of the size of government, we cut taxes. We actually had more money to deal with. And so we didn't have to make any drastic cuts to any agencies. We didn't have to hurt any important programs. We put $6.3 billion into education 2 years in a row. I had record funding for education. We had an unprecedented, we just put $2 billion into infrastructure projects in our state to fix every single structurally deficient bridge in the state and to move forward on the top priority road and the transit projects in every single jurisdiction in the entire state, things that people have been waiting for a decade. So I think if you run the government more efficiently and more cost effectively, and you can get your economy stimulated, you don't have to be worried about a lack of revenues. You can actually bring in more money just like you can in a business.
You all agree.
Exactly.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the important things, though, is also thinking about the expense control side. And I think your point about not cutting agencies, real expense control is not walking in and saying, oh, I'm slashing this and slashing that. Certainly, if there's wasteful programs, you don't want to keep them, you want to get rid of them. But real expense control is about process improvement, continuous process improvement every day. How do you figure out how do you leverage processes, better technology to deliver those services and bring your costs down at the same time? Let me give you an example in Nebraska, which kind of get your comment about the Democrats being surprised is kind of goes to this one. So we have a system called Access Nebraska. It's how people apply for economic assistance. And we were doing a really, really bad job. In August of 2014, before I took over, it was taking us nearly 24 minutes to answer the phone. Now think about that. Say you're a low-income person, and you've got a prepaid phone with 45 minutes on it, and you just spent over half that time waiting on hold just to talk to somebody. How does that make you feel? What does that do to your quality of life? That's just bad service. So by focusing on things such as process improvement, and by that I mean picking up the mail at 2 in the morning instead of 9 in the morning, so it all could be opened and scanned and ready to go at 8 o'clock when the call center people showed up. We've been able to take that on hold time down from that 24 minutes, and every month this year so far, we've been at our goal of 5 minutes or less. And not only are we answering the phone faster, our accuracy rate has improved, so now we're actually doing a better job making the people who are getting the benefits or people who deserve the benefits. We have taken the time it takes to process a SNAP application down from 40 days down to 10 days, and you don't think that makes a difference in somebody's quality of life? We've gone from a national rank of 48 out of 53 down to 27, and not that anybody's proud of being middle of the pack, it does show significant improvements in something less than 20 months. And also importantly, the federal government was planning on, because we were doing such a bad job, the federal government was going to yank $17 million of our funding, which means we at the state would have had to pick that up. So but by improving and doing a better job of delivering our services, we actually have saved the state of Nebraska, our taxpayers, $17 million. So that's how you deliver, again, process improvement to do a better job of delivering services and bringing your cost down at the same time. We've done it for our counties. We've consolidated all those servers they had in their courthouses, 90 of them into our state data centers. We've improved their reliability, we've improved their uptime, and we've reduced their network costs by 20%, saving those county taxpayers dollars. So this is how you get that cost savings. So when you're looking at how do I affect tax relief, well, it's just like in a business. Control your expenses, let your revenues grow, and then you've got that room for tax relief to be able to start pulling that back in. So it's not about coming in and, if you went to your customers in the private sector and said, hey, I'm going to reduce the price I'm going to charge you, but I'm also going to take away all these things you like about my service, well, you'd go out of business. Your customers wouldn't stand for it. Well, we shouldn't think about running government that way. We should, in the way that we're just going to take things away. We've got to deliver those services. People depend upon us. So we've got to figure out how we can do a better job of delivering those services and bring our costs down, just like in the private sector. And again, that's where that culture change is coming in that we're trying to affect. So we make, long after I'm gone, people are thinking this way in state government about how do we affect continuous improvement so that whatever we've been able to accomplish, they can build upon that and do an even better job in the future. That's ultimately how you drive down your ability, those expenses and get tax relief.
I know we're going to go to questions in a minute, but let me just have more on a personal note. And Governor Bevin, I think you want to address what he did.
I want to address something real quickly because actually, it's interesting. You got to cut the fat in government. If you don't think there's any, you haven't been following along, because I'll tell you, one of the things we did, we cut 9% out of our state budget. And there was crying and weeping and gnashing of teeth, but truth be told, it wasn't that hard. And we exempted K through 12 education, we exempted veterans, we exempted Medicaid, but all the other things we've cut, and nobody's missed it. Truth be told, we're more efficient, we're more effective. The reality is we have an obligation to be good stewards of your money. I've often asked this question: how many of you in this room ever had to buy your own bicycle? Okay, a handful of you. How many of you left that bicycle out in the rain? Seriously, none of you. And we need to start as governors being better stewards of your money and our own money as taxpayers. But I want to touch on something you said, Ann, about education. Thomas, we talk about history and the importance of things. How many of you think it would be a good idea that if we required a high school student graduating from high school in our country to know as much as somebody who's passing a test to become a first-time citizen, 100 questions? How many people think that's a good idea? I'll tell you what, it's what people like Doug Ducey is doing right now in Arizona, and it's something that's going to be done in Kentucky. It's a fantastic idea. These are the types of ways it's our responsibility to use the positions of influence that we have. But I want to touch on something real fast. Why do we even spend our money on public education? What is the purpose of using tax dollars for public education? It is to do, as Thomas Jefferson said, it is for the purpose of creating virtuous citizens. What is a virtuous citizen? It's not a goody-goody. It's not somebody who's holier than the next person. A virtuous citizen. Work is a virtue. Being productive is a virtue. Being an integral part of your community, that is a virtue. We have an obligation in our states and in our nation to educate our young people, and that does not simply mean getting a 4-year post-secondary degree that may or may not have any value, and you incur tens of thousands of dollars for it, and there's no outlet for it at the other end. We owe better than this to young people. And one of the things that I've pushed forward is we created a $100 million over the next 2 years workforce development pool where to apply for this money, it's requiring our post-secondary schools, vocational schools, technical schools, and our 4-year institutions, as well as a local high school, as well as local business, to work together to come up with a proposal where the three of them agree this is a need in our community. And we have got an obligation to stop assuming that every kid needs to go get a 4-year degree immediately and that they're somehow going to be made better for that, because we are misleading them and we are screwing America in the process.
Thank you. We're running a little late, but let's take some questions. We have some microphones out in the audience, so if I can see some hands here somewhere. There's one in the back there. Is there one in the back? Go ahead, please. Thank you.
My name's Larry Gelman. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. And as Ann pointed...
Doug, get ready to answer this one. This guy's from Arizona.
I've already asked him. As Ann pointed out, Republicans are doing an amazing job of dominating elections on the state level with governorships and state legislatures. And yet we're now in the midst of our third straight election where the Republicans have seemingly been unable to put forth a candidate that most Americans resonate to. My question is, why do you think that is, and what do you think the Republican Party needs to do better in order to change that?
Do you want to direct? I'll start with Governor Hogan, and we'll go across.
Well, it's an excellent question, and I'm not sure there's an easy answer for it. But, I mentioned earlier, I'm a guy in the bluest state in the country, second time in 50 years. We have 26% of the vote as Republican. I managed to find a way to talk about issues that appealed to a majority of the people in our state, and we focused on the things that people cared about. So I actually got more votes from Democrats and independents than I did from Republicans. We weren't supposed to win the race. Everybody predicted we were going to get blown out by 18 to 24 points. We ended up winning 20 out of 23 counties by 35 percentage points. And it's because we talked about the things that Democrats agreed with, that independents agreed with. We've got to find a way in our Republican Party to reach more people. And I think both parties are actually guilty of this. And I'm somewhat frustrated with national politics. I think there are a lot of people in both parties that are frustrated and not happy with the nominees in either party, quite frankly. And I think sometimes the Democrats nominate somebody that only appeals to a small slice of the Democratic Party. The Republicans may nominate somebody that appeals to a small slice over here. And about 80% of the rest of us in the middle are frustrated. And I think we've got to do a better job. It's very disappointing that we can't win elections. But look, governors all across America, we have 31 Republican governors. Unlike in Washington where nothing gets done, we have to govern every day. We make decisions, we make things happen. That's what people in America want. So first of all, we ought to be electing a governor as the nominee. And second,
I would agree with that. I like governors.
Instead of somebody in Washington that just argues all the time and absolutely gets nothing done. But I really do think that the process is skewed so that the Democrats appoint somebody that's too liberal and the Republicans appoint somebody that's too conservative, and most voters are disappointed.
Not so much this year, but that's a different story. I will say this, maybe on the first part, not so much the second. In all seriousness, though, this is what we have to understand. This is our responsibility. If we don't like it, it's our fault. This is a government of and by and for the people, and we are increasingly disengaged. We are increasingly cynical. We are increasingly jaded. We increasingly don't show up to vote because it might be raining outside. We don't encourage our children and our grandchildren to take this seriously, and we are squandering the greatest noble experiment that has ever been foisted upon the world of politics in the history of the world, and we are wasting it because we're not engaged. And we have an obligation, frankly, to step up. Every single one of us, regardless of whether you're on the right or the left, if you don't care as much as the people who stepped off transport carriers on Omaha Beach, if you don't care as much as the people who ate their shoes at Valley Forge in the winter of 1776, and you say you want a better America and you want a better whatever state you're in, and you don't care even some small percentage of that, you don't deserve it. We don't deserve it. The truth be told, we have got to step up. We have an obligation to sacrifice in some form or fashion. We really do. And so if only 50% or less of us in primaries, the nominees come out of primaries. In primaries have 30, 28, 37% of the people bother to vote, and only 6 of 10 people that are eligible to vote or even registered to vote. What are we doing about it? What are any of you doing about making sure that you get your friends, neighbors, and families to be engaged, to be registered, and actually be informed? One of the dangers our founding fathers warned us, one of the dangers of a democratically elected government, and granted we're a republic, but we elect democratically, and one of the dangers is eventually you get the government you deserve. And this is where we are.
Let me ask other questions. Right here, sir. Here's a microphone right over here.
This is a little off topic, but concern to us out here. I'm Carl Stetcher from the Denver suburbs. For Dr. Hogan, for Governor Hogan. The Calvert Cliffs project has been a nuclear facility giving power to Maryland for a long time. In the West, we're very concerned because they're building wind farms that take up acreage, solar farms that are burning birds that fly over and so on. How successful is that? Do you have any other plans? And could you talk about the arguments that are going back and forth regarding nuclear power versus solar and wind?
Sure. Well, it's most of the argument that we're having in our state, the Calvert Cliffs nuclear plant, and we're exporting natural gas as well, about $8 billion worth to Japan and other places that we're taking out of the same, just down the street from Calvert Cliffs. So we're doing natural gas, we're doing nuclear, we're doing wind and solar, but there are some folks from other places in the country who have come to protest that, but it's overwhelmingly popular in our state. They do a good job. They've never had any problems. It's good, clean energy. And, people are looking for, I'm an all-of-the-above energy guy. We ought to try everything that makes sense, but it's got to make economic sense. And those projects do, and they're going to be very successful.
How's the coal in Kentucky, Governor Bevin? So we're gonna
Coal's
see
under
that again?
the energy landscape is changing. We all know that. Coal is under duress, but there's never been in the history of the world more coal consumed than there is now. They're building coal-fired power plants the world over. They're building 18 brand new coal-fired power plants as we speak in Europe, 6 of them in Germany, using the pioneer technology that we've developed in terms of new technologies for burning and scrubbing. And so everywhere but in America, where we have an abundance of it, it is still providing more than 35% of the world's electricity. In this country alone, it's more than a third, probably more than that globally. In the lifetimes of those in this room, while the energy of the future may not involve it, the bridge from where we are to whatever that future looks like is going to be built out of coal of necessity. And so we've got to, again, be mindful of the fact that if you don't want rolling brownouts, why are they building 6 brand new coal-fired power plants in Germany? Because 2 winters ago, when they had a tough winter, they were having rolling brownouts in Germany, and they weren't having electricity on demand, and they weren't having heat on demand, and they didn't want to be held hijacked by Gazprom, which supplies 30+% of the energy to Europe through the Ukraine from Russia. These things matter. There is geopolitical impact associated with us vilifying certain energy sources. I'm a big believer in free markets. I'm also an all-of-the-above guy. But if we have to subsidize something with our tax dollars in order to justify its existence, I'm not sure it's a good bet.
Another question, please, right back there.
First of all, I want to thank you for today. It's been very informative. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. But I'm a very well-educated, involved citizen, and I must say that I don't know what the truth is with this whole election going on. If I turn on CNN, I get one set of numbers and one set of story. Turn on Fox News, I get another. I have to go to a fact check, and I'm still not sure. How do we make the informed decisions, as you were talking about, and get involved and get friends involved if we don't really feel we know the truth? That, I think, is so imperative.
I'll let the governors answer, but let me insert one thing. There's a very fine piece in the Wall Street Journal today, if I can just mention maybe what you're getting at, both because of the Bernie rise and the Trump rise. A lot of people have been saying, what are the American people trying to tell us? And this article says, unfortunately, it's hard to get there when ordinary people with concerns about the future for themselves and their families are hectored and lectured about how loathsome they are. The writer goes on to quote the playwright Bertolt Brecht, who said, would it not be easier in that case for the government to dissolve the people and elect another?
And while we laugh, to the heart of your question, That's true enough. And we were joking earlier that, frankly, there's many in Washington that would probably wish they could do that. What we have seen is a government of and by and for the people rearing its head in a way that we haven't. So what is the truth? I mean, the truth be told, if you think that what you get in what passes for media is actually the lay of the land, I would encourage you to think otherwise. In my race, 2 days before the election, I was followed. The New York Times came to write the op-ed. They were writing the post-mortem on my campaign. I was down 5%. Every expert, Cook, Sabato, all the crystal balls, all the nonsense, all of them. I wasn't going to win. I was going to lose by 5%. Every poll that had been done, because they created a narrative and they wanted to make it a self-fulfilling one. I won by 9%. It wasn't because I did something magical in 2 days. It wasn't even close. This race is not nearly what you're being led to believe. If you want to understand the truth, if you want to understand, I would ask, in all seriousness, ma'am, I would ask two things. I would ask each of us to look internally and ask ourselves, what do we want? What do we want for our children and our grandchildren? What is it that we value about America? What are we concerned about the potential of losing? And then ask ourselves, what is the greatest threat to the things that we value, to the liberties and the freedoms and the independence? What is the greatest threat to that? And then find solutions to that and choose those individuals that we think will best serve us in terms of limiting the threats that face the things we value. But I would also encourage each of you in this room, and in a town like Aspen, I mean this with absolute sincerity, talk to the people that shop in the general. Go into a Dollar General. Go into a Walmart and ask the Walmart greeter. I'm not kidding.
We
I'm
don't
not
have
kidding.
Dollar General in
Well,
Aspen.
I mean, whatever. Go into whatever you got. But I mean,
We get
we
the
laugh.
point.
We laugh, but
You'll
I'm
have to
telling
go to
you,
Maryland for the
these
Dollar
ask
General.
a police officer, ask a military veteran, ask a firefighter, ask the person. Okay, how about this? Ask the person who removes the chocks from the wheel of your plane when you fly out of here. How about that? Seriously. Ask these people what's happening. Two things move the markets, and two things move people at the ballot box. And those two things are fear and greed. And right now, fear is more rampant than people will let on. People are fearful, and when people are fearful, they're not answering polls. They're not talking to CNN. You listen to these experts that are on these Sunday morning talk shows. They all live in Washington, D.C., and they all talk with each other every week, and they don't have a clue what's happening out here in the real world. And people are going to be shocked come November. Mark my words. They will.
We're running over, so we're gonna stop. But just a final word from Governor Ricketts and Governor Hogan and Governor Bevins. Thank you.
Great. What did you want me to give the final word on?
Anything you want. Any final
Well,
word
hey, again, folks,
on
thank
this?
you all very much for having all of us here today. And I think that what I see as a very positive trend is that you have more people like my colleagues up here who are getting involved. You know, people with a business background who understand that government serves an important function, that it's important that it works, and that it's our jobs as governors to make it work. And so you see this all across the country in a way in the last few years that I don't think we've seen much in the past. And again, this is not a Republican-Democrat thing, right? You look at the governor of your own state here has a business background. And that's what I think is encouraging, is that more people who have that experience running other organizations are stepping up into government to say, I can make this work better. I've got the experience to help make government work, because that is what people want. People are frustrated. People don't want no government. Most people are not anarchists, but they're really unhappy with how poorly government is run. And trust me, having been in the office when I saw how things were being functioned, government is appallingly run. And I can't even imagine what it's like at the federal level. But you see more people that have that background in running organizations stepping up and saying, I can make this better, I can make government work, and that's what people want.
Governor Hogan, a final word.
Well, I just want to thank the Aspen Institute for putting on this great event, and thank you for inviting us today. It was wonderful. We appreciate the opportunity, and we've loved being here for a couple of days with the Republican Governors Association. We love the weather. I left, it was like 110 in the Maryland, Washington area, so it's very nice, in spite of the rain. But, you know, I go back to this last question about truth, and I think that's what everybody's looking for. And I believe that people, it doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum, and it doesn't matter if you're a liberal Democrat or a conservative Republican or somebody in between. I think everyone's frustrated that government's not working. They're frustrated that politicians don't tell them the truth, that they can't get the real story on the media. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think what people are hungry for is people that'll just tell them exactly what they think without the spin, and come up with real bipartisan solutions, and then say what you're going to do, and then do what you said you were going to do. It doesn't happen much in politics. I think it's one of the reasons why we've been successful in Maryland. I have people come up to me and say, I'm a liberal Democrat, and I don't really agree with you on a lot of issues, but I think you're telling the truth, and you tell it exactly what you think. And I think that's what people want, straight talk. They're tired of the spin, they're tired of the politics. People are frustrated. This election is frustrating so many people because they don't know what the truth is, and they're not happy. And this is the first time in my lifetime, a majority of all the people in the country do not like either choice. Right? It's true. Any poll you look at, a majority of America does not want to vote for either one of these two candidates. It's the first time I've ever seen it before. Something has to be done. We've got to start nominating people who appeal to a greater percentage of people in America and in our states.
Well, I thank you very, very much. Let me say, it has been a great honor for me to meet these three governors, and I welcome our other governors. If you want the straight truth, what I found is I Googled each of these governors to get ready, and I read their State of the State talk. Get it straight, get it from the people you're following or don't want to follow, but listen to what they say, not anyone else. And I learned a lot, and I have great admiration for each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.